This is the Minneapolis Police Department. You are all under arrest. Sit down on the ground.
To another developing story this morning, multiple anti-ICE demonstrators were arrested in Minneapolis overnight during a violent demonstration outside a hotel. Officials said the demonstrators were trying to force their way into the hotel where they believed ICE agents were staying the night. This comes as lawmakers call out Democratic leaders in the state they say are putting agents and citizens at risk by allowing demonstrators to interfere with deportation operations. Over the weekend, an armed anti-ICE demonstrator was shot and killed during a fight with Border Patrol.
Footage seen from a sidewalk, the street, inside a store,
Oh my God!
and from a car just feet away. Videos show federal agents shoving a person with Preddy, then stepping in. That's when an agent pepper sprays him in the face while Preddy clutches his phone. Seconds later, several agents wrestle Preddy to the ground, where videos do not appear to show him brandishing a weapon, as DHS had stated. This angle showing an officer swing something at Preddy's head. Pushing in on this video, you can see one agent reach behind Preddy, appearing to remove a gun from his waistband. As someone yells, "Gun," that same agent appears to step away, and about a second later, the first shot is fired, followed by a flurry of gunshots.
Let's cut the bullshit already, because it may be Fox, but it ain't news.
Agents reasonably thought that they were in danger because a gun was produced.
If he's armed and they knew he was armed, it was imperative for them to take him down.
And now here, literally a guy pulls a gun on an ICE officer. He defends himself.
When you're seeing a gun in your face and you're in the scuffle, then you have to, again, assume that is a gun.
And you could tell in that moment that they saw something or something spooked them, because they all back off all of a sudden, and then you hear shots fired.
You've got an armed individual, somebody holding a gun up to Border Patrol. Of course you are going to see a reaction.
I'm convinced now that the only people who can stop it are on the right. I know it takes a lot of courage to go against your tribe or whatever it is, but that's what we need. We need some decent people on the right to show some courage and some common sense. And if our leaders aren't even trying to reduce the amount of chaos in the street rather than exacerbating it, if our leaders are intentionally creating and encouraging violence and fear, then I hope you will also agree we need new leaders, because these are not leaders. And to the people of Minneapolis, to the Preddy family and the Good family, and these people who were looking out for their neighbors, we want you to know that we are with you and you are not alone.
Governor Tim Walz says that President Trump told him, quote, "We'll be doing things different with Tom Homan in charge." And this morning, after meeting with Homan, Walz's office said the governor reiterated Minnesota's priorities: impartial investigations into the Minneapolis shootings involving federal agents, a swift, significant reduction in the number of federal forces in Minnesota, and an end to the campaign of retribution against Minnesota. One of the big questions now, though, is exactly how different will things look here in terms of the operations? Border Patrol Commander Greg Bavino has taken a very aggressive approach, trying to sweep up as many illegal immigrants as possible, which has often led to clashes with protesters. Homan has pushed for a more targeted approach, focusing on specific individuals with violent criminal records. A lot of folks here seem to be at least hopeful that this leadership change will help calm things down.
To all units, proceed to your post assignments. All units, proceed to your post assignments.
That's the sound of the police. Whoop, whoop. That's the sound of the beast.
Yeah, baby, it's episode 16 of Probable Cause on January 27th, 2026. Jeff Norman and the FBI whistleblower, Greg Dillon, with you as always. Good evening to our beloved audience. Thank you for joining us, and good evening to you, Greg. How are you?
I'm fine, Jeff. Thank you. How are you?
I got a lot of personal problems, I'll be honest with you. No, I'm fine. I'm just joshing. A little bit later in this show, we'll be joined by our special guest, Bill Shipley. He is a defense attorney nowadays, but for about 22 years, he was a federal prosecutor. And the subject we're going to discuss tonight is very much in his wheelhouse, his bailiwick, you might even say, Greg. Do you ever use that word, bailiwick?
Not recently, no. Not in this century.
It's an underused word. He's kind of the lawyer's lawyer when it comes to this topic. If you look at all the people pontificating and opining on X, very often the other lawyers say, man, this guy really knows the deal. And his Substack, let me just mention that now, and we'll get into it a bit more with him, obviously, when he joins us. Mm-hmm. It's shipwreckedcrew.substack.com. He tweets and blogs under that pseudonym, Shipwrecked Crew. So check it out. Check it out. Some of it is free. Some of it is behind a paywall. Anyway, before Bill joins us, I'm curious, on a personal level, you and I have been getting into it with a lot of folks on Facebook about the shooting of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. And, I observed that unlike most current events issues that generate a lot of heat, the action is usually on X, and it is in this case too. Usually it's not on Facebook, but in this case, boy, the Facebook people have put down their recipe books and their photos of broccoli and all the stuff they usually post about, and they are quite interested in this. And I don't know about you, but I've been getting accused of being immoral and a bootlicker and things like that. How about you?
Yeah, very much the same. I'm always curious why the other side, when they disagree with you, tries to go as low as they can. You have mental health issues, you're a Nazi, Gestapo, mentions of Anne Frank, police state. And I'm always curious, like, why they think that makes their argument stronger or better, because I just immediately dismiss that type of person with a low intelligence fool that has to, hit below the belt every time they try to make a point.
Well, there's a lot of people out there, so I can't really generalize too much. But I think a lot of folks aren't just saying it as an insult. They genuinely feel that people who aren't automatically assuming it was murder are immoral. Can't you see that? What's wrong with you? I mean, by the way they're talking and posting.
Well, I think somebody even challenged you and said something about substituting the word law for help me along with this, but they
I don't
said,
know, there's a lot of different ones that are along the
yeah,
same
no,
line.
I know, but they said something about your decisions are based upon law and not upon
not like morality or being a human.
I'm sorry, it was morality. You're right. It was morality.
No.
And my point when I addressed it was, people go to law school. They don't go to morality school. They go to a law library. They don't go to a morality library. They look into a law book. They don't look into a morality book, because morality is far too subjective. And, the law tries to define, almost the, undefinable. And we've gotten further away from seeing if it is legal and into this arena where is it moral, is it just, and it's like that's not the issue. When you go into court, no one is going to bring up morality, or at least they shouldn't be trying to bring up morality. They should be trying to argue.
But when you're arguing and discussing on social media, it's okay. I think what you said is absolutely valid. I agree. But the other point I want to make is I think that, the law is supposed to be based on morality. It's not always how it plays out. But in my opinion, with regard to the conversations we've been having, I feel like it is moral, because there's been a lot of police shootings over the years, sometimes good ones, sometimes bad ones. And people have given a lot of thought over the years to balancing these competing considerations. And that is moral, I mean, you certainly don't want civilians to be shot, killed, injured when they don't deserve it. Absolutely. On the other hand, when we ask police to risk their lives, and they do, you can't make it so heavily weighted toward the civilian that it's unfair to the cop. And that's
and that's the balancing act that's always in play. But, when a judge gives their charge to a jury, they're going to remind them that they are to apply the law as it is written, not as how they think it should be, or they feel it should be, or anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. So even when you're on social media, people should just be more aware of what they're saying. Are they making a legal argument or a moral argument? And I don't know if they do this with other professions too, but it's so obvious that people who know nothing about the law, or almost nothing, pretend they do. I think they think that, based on how reasonable they see themselves, that the law should just fall into alignment with their assumptions. Is that the feeling you get?
Yeah. Well, I also think that they have an unrealistic sense of what the actual law really says and what they think it says, because they read something that someone says, this is so-and-so, this is such and such, and they pick up on it. And now they say, oh, okay, that reinforces my belief, so this is what it is. And everyone, in that chat room happens to be wrong, but they keep reinforcing it in an echo chamber until they're convinced that they're all correct, and they all have the legal upper hand, when in fact it's all a flawed premise.
Right. I should have made a list of all the wacky assumptions that people are making, but one that's coming to mind now is this notion that one of the agents, and by the way, they weren't ICE. A lot of people are saying how terrible ICE is, and maybe ICE is terrible, but these weren't ICE agents. These were Border Patrol agents. One of the Border Patrol agents disarmed Alex Reddy in the middle of the encounter, and everybody's automatically assuming that the other agents were aware of that. So, I just try to, sometimes I stoop to their level and I start insulting them too, but I usually start by just saying, well, how did you conclude that they saw it? They're not sitting home watching it on a video like you are. They're in the middle of an intense fight.
With people screaming and blowing whistles and blowing their car horns, which makes it even more confusing and more chaotic. And the other thing, and I'm hoping that Bill will touch on this, I went through two different academies, a municipal police academy and the FBI academy. And in both academies, we were instructed, just because a person is disarmed of one weapon does not necessarily mean they don't have a second or third weapon. Now, it would be unusual, but it's certainly not unheard of. I mean, I knew police officers that carried two handguns on them, even though that was unusual, but
does that translate to a reasonable fear for your life? In other words, if you're scuffling with a guy, whether it's Alex Preddy or somebody else, I think I might be getting texted from Bill here. Hang on. Okay, he said he's going to join us in about 10 minutes, so that means about an hour he'll be here. What was I just saying?
No, you're saying about if someone has a primary weapon, doesn't necessarily mean they don't have a second weapon.
Oh, yeah. So would that be like a reasonable fear of death? Or, I mean, in other words, I hear what you're saying. It doesn't mean that they don't have a second weapon. But let's say the officers knew that he was disarmed. Is it reasonable, once they know that, to fear, well, we better shoot him fatally because he might have another weapon?
No, not because he might have another weapon, but if he appears to be trying to access another weapon or some object that they don't know what it is, then having disarmed him from one weapon by no means precludes the chance that he has a secondary firearm on him. Right.
And you mentioned that the noise issue, that was one of the questions that somebody put to me on Facebook. They said, well, if they heard the guys, whoever yelled out, gun, 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 he's got a gun, shouldn't the guy who have disarmed him yelled that he's got the gun just as loudly? And I'm like, well, let me ask Greg that. I would think, common sense tells me that that's relevant information. We can't tell from the video whether or not the guy who disarmed him shouted it out, but is that protocol? Would you normally advise the other officers that you've got the guy's gun?
I don't want to second guess him, but if that were me, I would try to convey that I have his handgun. But again, that doesn't preclude him having a secondary firearm on him.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I was looking at the comments. Did you say that it would be standard to call out?
I would try to convey that to my colleagues that I have, in my possession his firearm.
Right. Now, it could be, we don't know for sure, but I think what you said indicates a very real possibility that he's dead because of the protesters.
Yes.
Because they were honking their horns and blowing the whistles and so forth, and maybe that's why nobody heard.
Jeff, you showed footage of the Minnesota Police Department making arrests or attempting to make arrests at that hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And had that type of response taken place weeks ago, as it should have, we would not even be having these conversations about the Renee Good shooting and the Alex Preddy shooting. These probably would not have taken place, but for the fact that the Minnesota Police Department has stood down and not responded to calls for assistance like they should have from the start. Because if this is not taking place in other parts of the country, and it certainly was never taking place when Tom Homan was in charge of deportations under Obama, then the only difference is the fact that Minnesota has tolerated unlawful protests for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Let me take a look at one of these comments here. Jeff, you dismissed my statement. Why an arrest has to conclude with cuffing someone right out of hand when I saw that it could be done differently without cuffs. No, Stefan, I did not. I didn't even see your statement. I was referring to something I saw on Facebook. But anyway, now let me see if I can figure out what you're saying. Why an arrest has to conclude with cuffing someone right out of hand? Well, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're asking. Whenever somebody accuses me of doing something naughty, it catches my eye, and I want to try to at least address it. Anyway, it's hard when you don't have a producer to keep a conversation going and look at the comments at the same time. Stefan, feel free to give us a call on the phone, and we can talk about whatever's on your mind. And like I said, Bill Shipley, the former federal prosecutor and currently defense lawyer, a.k.a. Shipwrecked Crew, will be with us in just a few minutes. And hopefully your questions will be answered. He is the guy that knows it. So let's take a look at a video or two and see if, let me give Stefan the phone number again in case he wants to call, or if in case anybody wants to call. Also, might as well let you nice people know about our other podcasts. On Wednesdays, we do Ask the Inspector with Scott Ritter. So that'll be tomorrow night. And then Thursday night, we're going to continue with this topic. Nathan Daly is a popular podcaster. He's an ex-police officer. Imagine that, Greg. An ex-police officer, a current podcaster. Can you relate?
Slightly, sure, yeah. He's a real podcaster. I'm a pretend podcaster, but that's okay.
Well, you have me as a crutch. He goes on, and I have you as a crutch. He goes on all by himself on YouTube, and he's pretty good. Anyway, that'll be the first time he joins us. That's Thursday night. All right, let's take a look at.
Jeff?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't even know if he was really a cop. He could be lying. Who knows? Nobody ever checks these things. I have a theory about like courtroom that's so that they don't even check if people are real lawyers. So like, my cousin Vinny, I have this theory that people could just show up and nobody would ever even check, but I don't know. No, I'm sure he's a real cop, but I don't know. I don't know what department. All right, let's take a look at a video. This is a CBS report. This is I picked this video because it's somewhat revealing just as far as like what's captured in it, but also the way it's narrated is worth some commentary. Let's give it a listen.
2 minutes before the shooting, Alex Preddy is seen arguing with officers. One officer pushes him back, and an individual is detained as Preddy's argument with officers continues. Preddy, holding a cell phone, was allegedly there as an observer to document what was happening. About a minute later, Preddy is seen standing in the street, filming, directing a car past him. An officer then approaches another apparent observer and pushes her. She moves to Preddy and holds him by the waist, and the officer approaches and pushes Preddy. A second woman walks over. The officer pushes her to the ground, then sprays Preddy with a chemical irritant. Preddy raises his hands to block the spray. Preddy and the first woman then move to a...
See, I wanted to stop that because one of the things I wanted to point out was that the CBS announcer doesn't even mention that Alex Preddy started it. And that's when I say started it, I'm talking about it being the final encounter that led to the scuffle. He came over and he put himself directly in front of the protester, and one of the agents went nose to nose with him, and I'm pretty sure he touched him, which is a crime. I mean, he didn't touch him like in any way that hurt him, but you can't really plausibly say the guy's just observing with his phone when you go up and you touch a cop and go face to face and interfere with him who's when he's having an altercation with one of the protesters. So, I don't see how any reasonable person could deny that that's relevant and it has to be part of the conversation. Yet it wasn't part of this report, and a lot of people are saying that, well, the agent started it. So,
well, Jeff, even when you showed the video in the beginning, the narration is sort of a tell, and I've always been a big fan of what's called statement analysis. You ask someone to write out the statement of what they experienced, and a lot of times it's very telling, either the way they narrate something or the words they use or the way they go from third person to first person or gloss over something and then put specific detail on something else. It gives away a lot. And, when I'm watching these clips, he's clutching his cell phone. He's not holding his cell phone in his hand recording. He's clutching his cell phone, so it elicits this sympathetic description of what he's doing. Women clutch their purse, I don't ever hear of a man clutching his cell phone. Another description was he was shoved to the frozen pavement. Now, it's Minnesota. Everything in Minnesota is frozen. So to have to go one step beyond and say it was frozen pavement he was pushed down to makes it sound even worse than just being pushed to the pavement. Now it's being pushed down to the frozen pavement. Again, it's tipping their hand that all their sympathies lie with him, and they're giving no sort of deference to law enforcement.
Okay, we have a phone call. Hello there, caller. What's your name?
This is Stephen.
Oh, Stephen. Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
Well, that's good. I'm good too. Thanks for your interest. And Greg looks like he may be on his last.
Jeff, should I call after Bill, or is that okay now?
No, it's perfectly fine. I wouldn't have taken the call if it was a problem. What's on your mind?
Okay. Well,
Stephen?
Okay. We in the last episode we were talking about these things, and Greg insists that the police officer wants to go home safe and sound. It can be done without a handcuff, the arrest. In England, for example, when the officer shows a pink paper, the arrestee knows exactly that he's done. In Germany, there is an Article 1 of their constitution saying to respect the human dignity. Therefore, the cops cannot put handcuffs on unless the arrestee shows signs of fleeing or fight, then all bets are off. So it can be done differently. It has been done differently. I happen to believe the American law enforcement makes it too easy on themselves, too convenient. The argument Greg brings up, while we have diverse society, look at the Great Britain. They're as diverse as we are. How can they manage to do it without having to resort to shoot? In Germany, officers are trained not to shoot, according to Scott, and I have witnessed it.
Okay.
Your take.
Well, I have to confess and apologize. I was distracted because Bill is trying to join us, and I was helping him. And he's here, and he's here now. Do you want to call back later, like you suggested?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't realize he was going to come in right now, and
Not a problem.
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So we got that, and we got Bill here. Let's see. There he is. How you doing, Bill?
Good evening. Afternoon for me. Evening for you.
You are in the Golden State, right?
Correct. Up in the northern Sierra Nevadas near Lake Tahoe.
Very good. This is Greg. Greg, this is Bill Shipley, the famous Shipwrecked Crew.
Nice to meet you, Bill.
Retired FBI, I hear?
Yeah, I did 5 years down in D.C.
Okay.
And you were assigned where?
I did 11 years in the Eastern District of California and 10 years in the District of Hawaii.
Oh, wow. Okay, nice.
All right, so we've been talking about the shooting of Alex Pretty, and we were just looking at. There's a lot of different videos. It's hard to know what's the best one to show. Let me just rewind on we were looking at. You can see if we play videos, Bill. You can see okay.
Yeah, I can see just fine.
Right. Can you tilt your camera a little bit so you got a lot of space above your head, or is that a problem?
No, that's fine.
Okay, that looks better then. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Thanks. All right, so this is a CBS report which kind of shows some of the pertinent stuff, but it's also interesting the way it's being narrated. So we were considering it in both ways. Let's take a look at it from the beginning.
2 minutes before the shooting, Alex Pretty is seen arguing with officers. One officer pushes him back, and an individual is detained as Pretty's argument with officers continues. Pretty, holding a cell phone, was allegedly there as an observer to document what was happening. About a minute later, Pretty is seen standing in the street, filming, directing a car past him. An officer then approaches another apparent observer and pushes her. She moves to Pretty and holds him by the waist, and the officer approaches and pushes Pretty. A second woman walks over. The officer pushes her to the ground, then sprays Pretty with a chemical irritant.
All right, so I want to see if you agree with me, Bill. Right there is where Pretty assaults, in the legal sense, even though he didn't strike him hard, that's where he assaults the officer. And I think that's the reason they sought to detain and or arrest him. Is that your read too, or no?
Well, yeah, the statute involved is 18 U.S.C. Section 111. And Section 111 has 6 verbs. The first verb is assault. So it's clearly, and it's been interpreted in various jurisdictions as the common law interpretation of assault. But then that it also, and I always get these wrong, but it's assault, oppose, resist, interfere, intimidate. And there's another one. So
impede?
I don't think impede is one of them. I see that referred to all the time, and I think impede is not one of the 6.
Okay.
If you give me, I've written about this so many times.
Bill, that Substack article that you wrote recently was excellent.
Appreciate that. Okay, it is assault, resist, oppose. It is impede, intimidate, or interfere. Okay, and now as you know, in the January 6th cases, this was one of the government's go-to charges, and as you know, was repeatedly litigated. That it's an extraordinarily broad statute in terms of describing conduct that violates the statute. It's a spectrum, everywhere from intimidate to assault. It's a spectrum of conduct, all of which violates the same statute. And, all of the judges came down on decide that where a defendant's conduct falls within that spectrum is not a matter of guilt or innocence. That's a matter of sentencing. So obviously a more egregious assault would push you towards the higher end of the guidelines for sentencing purposes. A less, a more benign form of interfering or intimidating would you put you towards the opposite end of the spectrum for sentencing purposes. So the key, though, is physical contact. Once you have physical contact, and it doesn't matter how significant, any physical contact converts the crime from a misdemeanor to a felony. Okay, you can intimidate, interfere, impede, do all that stuff without making contact. Stand in the middle of the street, make them chase you away, blow, do all kinds of things to interfere with what they're doing, but without touching an officer. Right. And you've got a misdemeanor. But once
now the video isn't all that clear, but it does look like he touches him. How confident are you that he touched him?
Well, he clearly touched him. There's clearly physical contact there, and that's what the statute says. Statute doesn't require intent to injure. It doesn't require any kind of injury. It just requires physical contact. That's all. I mean, it's right in the language of the statute. And I'll pull it up again. It says, where such acts in violation of this section constitute only simple assault, a fine under or title of imprisonment of not more than 1 year is appropriate. Where such acts involve physical contact.
Right.
So that's a pretty low bar to clear to move yourself out of the misdemeanor category into the felony category.
Right.
Now, where a lot of this washes out and is where the contact is there, but it's de minimis, it becomes a matter of prosecutorial discretion as to whether you even charge. Right. You don't even charge. It's not worth the investment of resources. Now, if you want to say sauce for the goose and sauce for the gander, then you go back to January 6th, where there was no exercise of prosecutorial discretion by the Biden Justice Department. Everybody they could identify, they charged. They did not make a judgment as to level of contact, inadvertent, de minimis. It didn't matter. You had any physical involvement with an officer, you were going to eat a felony 111. I mean, they did it hundreds of times. And I was told over and over again, their justification was, it's not necessarily senseless, but their justification was, we just want to be consistent. Everybody gets the same treatment. If we start choosing, well, that's not a lot of contact, but this is a little more contact, then it becomes a matter of line drawing. But
in this case, I mean, they're not going to arrest him because he's dead. The significance here is more just understanding why they sought to arrest him. That was the moment, right?
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, in 21 years of having been a prosecutor, set January 6th aside. Let's call January 6th the aberration that it was. If I'm a prosecutor and this comes across my desk, my first call is to the agent and say, you really want to get yourself tied up in filing this? Do you really care? I mean, yeah, he bumped into you. So what? I mean, that kind of goes along with the job. One of the funny things, and I'm talking about laugh out loud funny things, is I had a lot of contact over the 3 years that I was January 6 cases where local law enforcement officers would just laugh. They would say, man, I have more contact than that with somebody on the street every shift. And it goes with the job, and to call every, not just to call every contact a felony, but to prosecute every contact as a felony is just, that's just throwing common sense out the window. Now, so let's talk about Mr. Pretty. If that comes across my desk, the first thing I do is call that Border Patrol officer and his supervisor and say, look, we can file this if you want. I really am not invested I'm not really committed to wanting to waste my time doing it, because federal prosecution is a zero-sum game. There's only X number of prosecutors across the country. If they work 2,000 hours a year each, you've got a finite number of hours that can be committed by them in their office and in courtrooms to prosecuting cases. Do you want to carve out 10 hours of effort from that total to do that case?
Bill, I mean, wouldn't you call it legal triage?
Yeah, exactly. I heard for so long, and you heard it too, Greg. It's like, oh, the feds, they only take the easiest cases. Well, federal prosecutor's office is not an office of last resort. And I don't say that pejoratively. District attorney's offices, they're an office of last resort. If they don't prosecute it, nobody will. Okay, so they have to factor that into their decision-making, is it's them or nobody. Okay, federal prosecutors are not an office of last resort. Yeah, they pick and choose, but they tend to pick and choose based upon where they get the most bang for the buck, where investing the time and the resources that are limited pays off. So sometimes,
Well, given that you're emphasizing how mild this is, do you think that the agent or agents plural overreacted, given that it was just a tiny little bump?
No, I don't, because when they arrest somebody in that circumstance, it is as much to promote their ability to finish their job that day in that location as it is to tee up that person maybe going to jail for what they did.
Right.
So when you have people actively interfering in real time in an enforcement operation, you can't just ignore it. The one way to stop people from impeding is to cuff them and sit them down against the wall while you go about your business.
Right. The other thing that I want to point out is a lot of Preddy's apologists have been saying, oh, he's a hero. He was, trying to rescue the damsel in distress. She was being pepper sprayed. But she hadn't been pepper sprayed yet. If you look at the video carefully,
Correct.
She had been pushed. So
there were three individuals involved: 2 women at Preddy, and one border patrol. That mistake's been made every day since Saturday, and these are not ICE officers; these are border patrol agents. Preddy and one of them were headed towards the sidewalk, and that's where he told him to go: is go to the sidewalk, get out of the way. And then the third woman, who's the one in the white jacket right there talking to the officer, okay, she turns around. That's not the shelf that's not the shelf we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
He gets them headed for. Now she turns around, and he's just giving them. He has the lawful authority to compel their compliance with his lawful order using the amount of non-lethal force that he believes is necessary to do so. And that's a reasonableness judgment. Did he have to shove her there? No. Could he have been a little more patient and given her a little more of an opportunity to make her way to the sidewalk on her own? He could have. That's just a circumstance where there are 2 reasonable choices. Right. One probably looks better on camera than the other, but neither is unreasonable. He's not hurting her. He's just enforcing her compliance or compelling her compliance with non-lethal force. He's pushing her out of his perimeter. They were in the process here of trying to set up a perimeter. There were ICE agents on the street. Preddy, his first error, maybe not his first error, but his clear error was while there were ICE agents on the street, he's directing traffic and telling cars to drive through. He's creating a hazard.
Well, actually, if we're talking about his first error, the news came out today that he had a confrontation a week ago.
Yeah.
And he broke his rib in that confrontation.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more that maybe Mr. Preddy's motivations in going there on Saturday morning weren't quite as altruistic and pure as was portrayed in the immediate aftermath of the event.
Oh, you're going to break a lot of hearts. Saint Alex is not
really,
might lose his sainthood.
Yeah, and it really begins to make you wonder, it does not seem that he was just a gun enthusiast who happened to buy a P320. It seems like maybe his desire to, assert his Second Amendment rights arose in connection with his belief that, this was a tyrannical government running roughshod over the rights of Minnesotans.
All right, I grabbed the still. Go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
But Bill, just the fact, that he broke his rib with a previous encounter. That in and of itself rises to an assault of an officer because he obviously was in such close proximity to an agent that he received.
Now your bias is showing. How do you know that it wasn't all the agent's fault who broke his rib?
Because he's putting himself in proximity. Yeah, he's so close that he can suffer that type of injury. It means that he's inserting himself into an area he does not belong. If you want to claim you're a legal observer, your phone has this unique feature on there called Zoom. So you don't have to stand a foot away from the officer to record. You can stand 8 feet away and still record. But obviously, he's looking for some sort of a personal, physical confrontation if he's suffering a rib injury a week earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see
that Saint Alex's devotees call, so he was just observing.
He was, and I think something that's interesting that's come out, a distinction that has been made clear in the last 24 to 48 hours is he wasn't a member of a protest. Okay. The group he was with tracked ICE to that location. They went to that location because they had been told that's where ICE was. They didn't go there to protest. They went there to intercede, to de-arrest, to the extent that, if you've got 12, even if you got 12 or 15 Border Patrol officers and they have one in custody and they have no support from the local PD and 75 people descend upon them, very rapidly you're going to face an option of letting the guy go and diffusing the situation or start shooting. Not going to be a lot of room between those two at some point.
While we're slamming St. Alex's devotees, we should also slam the ridiculous comments that we've been hearing from the Trump administration, and in the opening, you didn't see it, Bill, some of the Fox News commentators. It's really blowing my mind because they actually could just simply add one more point, and they're not. They keep saying, that you can't show up at a demonstration with a gun. You can't approach an agent. Why don't they just say he interfered with the cops? How does it not occur to them to make that next statement?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this earlier today. It's like about this, and I understand. The president has made that comment that you can't show up with a gun or whatever, and we've had Kash Patel say something simple. It's like, well, you know what? Here's my response. No, you can't. You have every lawful right to be on the streets armed with a firearm on the Second Amendment. You also have every lawful right to wander into, right of freedom of movement. Okay, I'm not talking about a lawful right. I'm talking about the right of freedom of movement. You can wander out into the middle of a freeway as well. But both are going to place you in a circumstance of potential hazard. Preddy carrying the gun in a circumstance where, and I made this point in the writing, this is not a Second Amendment issue with regard to him carrying a firearm. A 4-time convicted gangbanger with a Taurus 357 tucked to the waistband is going to get the exact same treatment from Border Patrol that Preddy got. It's not the expression of his Second Amendment right. It's the fact that they are now engaged in a physical confrontation with someone who's armed. He presents a level of risk to them that an unarmed person does not. And so he gets dealt with differently than an unarmed person. And he is, and as I understand the case law, and I've argued this issue a couple of times, he's not armed with a single P320 in a holster tucked into his small of his back. He's just armed. He's armed until he's unarmed. And he's not unarmed until he can be searched and it can be confirmed that he doesn't have another weapon. Once you're armed until you're disarmed. And simply removing one gun without being able to confirm, and Greg, you tell me if I'm wrong. He is on his knees. If you look at this video, we can look at it when you get to it. He's on his knees. He is essentially bent over at the waist with his knees drawn up under him. He has got both hands tight to his body. He's got his elbows tucked in. He's resisting the officer's ability to pull his hands away. Now, you don't get shot by somebody with the gun in their feet pulling the trigger with their toes. You get shot by somebody with a gun in their hand pulling the trigger with their fingers. Controlling the hands is the first thing the officers have to do. And when he's got his hands in tight to his body and he's resisting them being able to pull his hands away so they can see, they don't know if he's got another gun in his front waistband that he can access. Just because they see one in the small of his back that they get away from him, they don't assume that they're safe. If a law enforcement officer assumes he's safe because the one visible gun has been removed, that officer has, increased to the own likelihood that he's going to the hospital by a gun he doesn't see.
Right. So this shot right here kind of debunks the myth that 6 agents were lying on top of him and he was flat on the ground. Go ahead.
I watch these videos over and over and over again. I got my hands on a couple of slow motion ones that allowed me to move it frame by frame. Well, video doesn't have frame, but in effect, frame by frame. There are 2 officers on their knees. One is pulling on his right hand. The other is pulling on his left hand. Every other officer is on his feet and nobody is on top of him. They are trying to control his arms and his hands when they see the gun in the small of his back. This is standard police work. They're trying to get control of his hands so they can handcuff him. And he is not cooperating. Somebody who is not resisting simply goes limp and lets their arms be put behind their back and they get handcuffed and it's all over.
Bill, I grabbed the in your Substack post, you have 9 photos and you describe each one. Would that be helpful to look at now? Or
Sure.
Look at the video. All right. We have video and the stills. So I have them in the order that you posted them.
Okay.
Just
now,
tell me if you want me to move to the next one.
No, we can. Okay. So I'll just point out to you what I point out in the Substack for those who can't read it because it's paywalled. Okay. You see the officer in the camouflage backpack. He is on his knees. He is fighting for control of Preddy's right hand. There's another officer that's just to his right that you can't see very well at this point. That second officer is fighting for control of Preddy's left hand. The officer in the gray that's standing in the middle with his hand down inside, he is actually trying to grab the gun. He has spotted Preddy's gun in a holster in the small of his back, and he is trying to get his hands on that gun. And he's in this position for 3 or 4 seconds. He has to make repeated efforts to try to get his hand on it with all the commotion of people moving around. You can't see him here, but the officer who's just barely in the frame on the left side there, where you can see his hand and his torso, that's actually the officer who ends up shooting. He is at that moment in time, he has just turned around. He had been facing the other direction, which is where the female was that Preddy was separated from. He was actually facing her, dealing with her, and then he is just at this very moment turned around to see what's going on in this scrum. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 officers on their feet, one on his knees you can see, and another on his knees that is obscured by the officer in the camo backpack. So go to the next one. I think you can see them all.
Yeah, before you start to, there's the next photo, but before you start describing, let me ask you a question. Do you think there's a chance that they knew or had reason to believe he was armed from the moment he came over based on encountering him in the street, if the gun was visible, or the previous time where the ribs were broken? Do you think they might have known that this is a guy who tends to be armed?
I doubt it. And I think the earlier photographs show that his coat was long enough that would have covered up the gun that he had in the holster in the small of his back, that you couldn't see it until the tussle here where his jacket is pulled up and it's exposed. And now you can see the officer.
We don't have any video of the broken rib incident. They might have.
No,
he might have been armed then. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Go on. I'm starting to interrupt. This is the second photo now.
Now you can see the officer in the gray is again. He's got his hand right where that weapon is. But when you play this video, he has to make repeated efforts to try to grab it and extract it. And I think at some level, he's trying to be careful to some degree. He doesn't want to just reach in and grab a weapon. He doesn't know if there's a safety on it or what. He doesn't want, it to go off inadvertently and hit somebody. He's trying to. And so he seems to be, he doesn't dogpile in. He doesn't just come rush right in like it's a scrum in rugby and he just dives in. He has actually tried to step between two officers here, reach in with his right hand and get his hand on that weapon so he can pull it out. It's clear when you watch this in real time. That's the only thing he's doing. That's all he's concerned with, is getting his hands on the gun.
Yeah. And we see it clearly sitting at home watching it now. Do you think the other agents saw him disarm Preddy?
From start to finish, this entire episode lasts less than 5 seconds. And I, honestly, I would say, and it's a guess. It's just a guess. And Greg, I don't know if he were ever in this position, but I'm going to guess, and I have reasons for making these guesses. I have law enforcement that are close to me. The focus of everybody is on his hands. What's he got in his hands? They're not looking at the small of his back. Now, the officer in gray clearly saw it because he starts reaching for it. And then somebody yells gun. But I'm going to imagine that when one of the agents yells gun, you're not looking at the small of his back for a gun. You're looking at his hands. Or you're trying to get, trying to see where you would expect a gun to be. Okay, so again.
Yeah, and you also made a very good point. I think it was you either on X or in your Substack post that just because an officer's head is turned in a particular direction and it looks like he might have seen it happen, his eyes could have been looking downward or upward, not necessarily exactly straight up.
And that's my point is, I think every officer in that circumstance, their training is, we got to get his hands. We got to get his hands. What's he got in his hands? When you hear gun, you don't think, let me search the small of his back and see if he's got a gun shoved in the cracks of his, rear end. Where is a gun likely to be? And that's where you're going to focus your attention. And then only when you satisfy yourself the gun's not where you think it should be, do you start thinking about where else could it be?
Right. Okay, next photo.
Okay, now you're starting to see a little. Okay, so the reason I put this photo in is now we can say that the officer who fired the fatal shots has perceived a threat. He's reaching for his gun. He had not reached for his gun to this moment. Now, we don't know. I haven't seen an audio linked up with this particular video. We don't know if he reaches for his gun because he hears somebody say gun, 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 or he sees the gun himself. We don't know. It could have been either of those. It could have been both. The gun is in a position where he should be able to see it if he focuses on it. But if he's looking at something else, he's not necessarily going to see the gun.
Right.
but he's clearly perceiving a threat because he is reaching for his own firearm.
Right. We know from the video that he's doing this approximately simultaneous to the other agent disarming him. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And we'll see that here in just a second. This is about the moment where I think the other agent actually gets a grip on the gun, because I think the next image has, and these were just like a fraction of a second apart. So now you can see that gray agent has stood up. I keep wanting to point at the screen like people can see what I'm pointing at. But we see the gray agent is now upright. And we know from the video taken from the other side that the gun's now in his right hand. Remember, he was reaching with his right hand. He got his hands on it. He spins 360, or he's in the process here of spinning 360 so that his back will be to the scrum, and then he's gone. He takes off with the gun. Now you can see, okay, so now you can actually clearly see, it's you only see his face because of the mask he's wearing. You can see the same officer in with the camo backpack who's on his knees. Next to him, directly to his right, is the only other officer that was on his knees the whole time. And you can just see his mask. You can see his face through the opening of his mask. Everything else is all black. But as you go through a couple more slides, you'll see the officer that's in the all black, where you can see just his face. He's got his hands on Preddy's left hand and left arm. The other officer in the camo backpack has got his hands on Preddy's right hand. Okay, they're trying to pull his hands away so that they can see them, they can control them, and they can hopefully eventually get him cuffed.
Bill, I don't want to break your train of thought on this, and it's only speculation, but do you think that there's a good chance, or do you think that there's a chance that the officer that draws his weapon is more alarmed because he hears the word gun and now he sees an empty holster and can't account for it?
That's I wrote that twice. I think I wrote it first on Saturday and again on Sunday. That the fact that there's suddenly an empty holster, a gun in a holster is a potential threat, right? A gun in a holster, I can see it. It's not going to shoot me from there. It's not going to shoot me from the holster stuffed in his waistline. I can see it. It's a potential threat. Once it's empty, and I've already heard somebody say gun, now the question is, where is it?
Okay.
Well, before you joined us, Bill, Greg and I were talking about whether or not the agent who disarmed him should have yelled out to let everybody know that. Do you think he should have, and do you have any sense of whether or not they heard or didn't hear him?
You know, I've never been in that position myself. You know, you would think that would be something, but does it occur to him in the half second that he spins 360 or 180 and he's leaving? Does it occur to him a second later? Is there, and I don't know that it's been established yet, is there an inadvertent discharge that startles him and everybody else? You know, all of this happens in just such, it happens damn near in a blink of an eye. You know, when you watch this in real time, I slow these down and create these images so I can, and this is what I used to do, you know, in the job, and even you do it as a defense lawyer. I'm trying to figure out what everybody is doing fraction of a second to fraction of a second, collectively and in relationship to each other. Right. I'm not doing it for an after the fact assessment with 20/20 hindsight of what should or should not been done. I'm slowing it down so I can see what actually happened. What was the actual sequence of events? Who did what first and second and last? And how
we'd have a lot more better vantage point, or at least an additional one, if we get to see the body cam footage. And the news came out, I think, either yesterday or today, that there is body cam footage. Do you think we will see it?
You know, I'll tell you what, I didn't have a lot of experience with body cam footage until January 6th. And body cam footage, it is some of the most frustrating stuff to work with because it points where the body points. It doesn't point where the eyes are. Okay. And it gets compromised very easily in this kind of jostling. I mean, You might as well just take a video camera and just shake it nonstop, and then watch the video and see how.
Yeah, but there's 6 or 7 of them. If they all have it combined with this footage, that collectively,
But they all might be like this. They all might be so that it's unwatchable. It's like It's like Steven Spielberg in the opening of Saving Private Ryan times 100.
Okay,
but
you would know.
But I'll tell you what it is invaluable for. Is it captures all the audio without the ambient noise that you get from cell phones taken 20 feet away.
Right.
You
so that would answer
everybody.
whether or not the agent called out he's got the gun, for example.
Yes, you'll know what everybody said and when they said it in relationship to each other. Because these body cams, they are centrally linked to a server. So they do not record on the agent's body. They record, via a wireless connection. And they're all running at the same time with identical timestamps. So you can take the 6 body cams and sync them up to all start, and you will see the exact sequence of events on each one from the perspective of that camera. And you will also hear the audio in effect in real time from multiple inputs.
Amazing. When Greg was a cop, I think that was before they had running water and electricity. So they certainly didn't have body cams then.
Yeah.
No.
That would have changed your life, huh, Greg?
Yes, significantly, I believe. But I also would have probably altered my conduct to accommodate for that.
You wouldn't call a suspect a fucking bitch, for example.
No, I was never big on cursing, so that would have been my problem.
All right. Should we look at the next photo, Bill?
Yeah. So and then the next couple will become important. Okay. Now you can see. Number one, they're all wearing gloves. It's like 10 degrees, right? All right. So everybody's wearing gloves, and Preddy is wearing multiple layers of clothing because of the weather.
Yeah.
Well, now, how easy is it to gain control of somebody when you're wearing gloves and they have 3 pairs of clothing on? You just cannot establish a real firm grip that is not subject to slipping. And what you see here, and you'll see a change in a minute, you can see now the agent to the right, who, kind of with the black mask, and you can only see his eyes. He's got his left hand now on the left forearm of Preddy. Preddy has, because they've been pulling in opposite directions, they're starting to get Preddy. They created enough room, so to speak, for Preddy to now begin to lift his torso up. Remember, he's been bent over at the waist with his arms in while the officers were wrestling with control of his arms. You can see right here. Right. And at this point, they're starting to win that battle a little bit. They're pulling his arms out, and he responds by sitting up. Now, you can't see it. I don't know if it's cropped here or not, but the officer with the camo backpack, in the image that I took out, I took it out in such a way that you could see his foot. He's using his right foot in this position. He's on his left knee, but he's brought his right foot up. He's got the sole of his boot on the ground, and he's using it as leverage to push so that he can pull on Preddy's right arm. Okay, so he's now not just using the strength of his arms. He's now leaning into Preddy, and he's using the strength of his legs and his back to try to rip Preddy's right arm free so that he can see it. In the image I carved out, that was important to me. You can clearly see it in the video. When you watch the video, you can see him pull his foot up, dig in his foot, and really push off to increase his leverage. But at the same time he's doing that, the officer on the other side, who's got Preddy's left arm, I think is beginning to lose control of Preddy's left arm here. He's now only got one hand on Preddy's left arm, and it's on Preddy's forearm.
Yeah.
Okay. If you go to the next one, and the officer, I think in the green, it looks the green there right behind him. That's the officer that drew his gun, and you can see the black object in his right hand, like right in the middle of Preddy's back. That's the officer with the gun who ends up firing. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you can see again the one officer, and again, the whole time, like I said, there's only 2 officers on their knees and nobody's on Pretty's back. Okay, you got 2 officers on their knees wrestling for his hands and his arms. Now you can see the officer on the right side of the screen is, he's still pulling. He's actually now pulling his body back to try to pull Pretty's arms. And you can now see Pretty's right arm, the officer with a camo backpack. Pretty's right arm is now extended down towards his side. So they're, to one degree or another, they're beginning to win the battle for control of Pretty's arms, but they're in a position where their grip is going to be, compromised by not, being really in tight with him where they could hold on firmly. But someplace in here, in this sequence of events, and this particular video didn't have audio with it when I was pulling these images out, there is the first shot that's fired that has been speculated to have been an inadvertent discharge of Pretty's gun. And that leads to a concept that's called contagious shooting, where the officer is already alerted to the fact that there's a gun, hear a shot, and they hear a shot, and it means one of 2 things. Either the bad guy's shooting at them, or one of the other officers has a reason to shoot at the bad guy, and then everybody shoots. So I don't know. It's not obvious to me from this video. I really wasn't looking for it exactly when this officer fires his first round. We know there's a slight delay between the first round that's heard and then this officer firing several rounds very quickly after that, because like I said, this video didn't have audio. I couldn't really establish in watching it when that happened. One more slide I think is important.
No, there's 2 more, but whatever you want.
Now, what's important here is, remember in the previous one, we could see Pretty's right hand or right arm extended straight down towards his side, right? Okay, go back one if we can.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, we can see his right arm is kind of straight down at his side. Now, when we go forward, now his arm is behind his back. And nobody's got a hold of it at this point. So the officer in the camo backpack is either let go on purpose, or Pretty has simply won the struggle for control of his right arm, and his right arm is now free because he's put it behind his back. Now, I speculated when I first watched this video on Saturday, we'll never know what was in Pretty's mind at this moment. But I speculated that he maybe realized, again, this is like over 2 seconds, he maybe realized somebody was grabbing for his gun and he reached back to stop that. But it was already gone. Yeah. Others said, well, he was reaching back to draw his weapon and start shooting. It's like, in this circumstance, I don't put a lot of stock in the idea that he thinks his way out here is to reach for his gun and start shooting. That to me is just an irrational reaction. But I can't see a natural reaction.
But you do think it would be natural for him to wrestle with them over the gun?
No, I think he's just.
Well, you said you thought he was trying to prevent the gun from being taken.
He's just trying to figure out what's happening. If somebody's grabbing for it, he might try to ward them off by hitting their hand or do whatever, or just put his own hand over the top of his gun to shield it. I don't think he's reaching. It doesn't strike me.
But I don't understand why you think he would do that, but he wouldn't use it. Why would he care about holding the gun there if he also wouldn't want to use it?
To me, that's just an instinct. I don't see an instinct being, let me pull my gun and start shooting at these 8 officers who are surrounded me, all of whom have guns.
All right, there's one more photo. I don't know. It's a little blurry.
But I'm trying to think why I took this one.
Well, everything.
I think this is just. Oh no, I know why. This is actually before all of that starts. This is the one that shows the officer who's standing upright in the middle with his back to the scrum. He doesn't even know what's happening. He's paying attention to the lady in white who was pushed down while the scrum is starting. And we know that the scrum is just starting because we see the officer in the gray who is the one that eventually pulled out the gun and took off running. So I just wanted to show that the officer who actually turns around and starts and is the one that within 3 or 4 seconds is shooting. he had only a 3 or 4 second look at what was going on because he had his back to that episode until he turned around. So he has very little time to decipher what's going on and what needs to be done. And within less than 2 seconds, he's already pulling his own gun because he perceives a threat. So
all right, let me ask you both the same question. You know, the way you've been describing it, Bill, makes it all seem very logical. You know, this is what was going on. And we appreciate that. The audience is commenting too. They also appreciate it. But let me ask you both a somewhat different question. How would you grade their performance, the way they handled the situation?
I mean, you know, you're sitting in, are we grading it with 2020, perfect 2020 hindsight?
Well, yeah. I mean,
well,
sure,
taking
that's
into consideration how things turned out terribly. You know, that's not fair. You know,
no. But let's say it's for training purposes or something. No, I understand it's not for you know.
Okay, so well, for training purposes, is an F because it was an F outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody who watches this has to come to the conclusion that even if all of the proper procedures were filed, we still shot and killed a guy. That's you know, I just think, you know, any law enforcement officer that has a conscience looks at that and says, the last thing I wanted to do was shoot and kill the guy.
But any specifics about the way they handled the situation that were either good or bad?
Did they do something wrong? Okay. Again, you know, goes back to my analysis that I've provided both with regard to the good shooting and now this one. You know, there's this misapprehension that there's only one right or one reasonable reaction to this set of circumstances, and that's simply not true. The law doesn't say there's only one way to respond. You know, there was more than one reasonable way to respond here, some more egregious than others, some that would have been, you know, easy to watch on video and some that are very hard to watch on video. I don't think this is an unreasonable reaction by the officer taking into, you know, until there is evidence, and I don't think or know that there ever will be, until there is evidence that the officer who discharged his weapon knew that the gun was gone and still shot.
But you both earlier said just because he's got one gun doesn't mean he doesn't have another.
No question, question, and that caveat remains.
Mm-hmm.
But if he actually knew that the first gun had been pulled and removed, yes, he still has the problem of not knowing if there's another weapon.
But if it's not in his hand, don't shoot him.
But the decision to shoot on that basis is more problematic, but not necessarily wrong.
Officer Dillon, what do you say? How do you
I had a question I wanted to run by Bill. I had read a report, or an article rather, that there was a still frame from the video that showed the SIG in lockback, and also the person had said in the frame you could see a fragmentation off the pavement, indicating that the Preddy's pistol had gone off, and without getting into the issue of these particular SIG models having a bit of a history of unintentional discharges, won't they be able to determine through forensic testing if that pistol was just fired, like within, you know, in that amount of time?
Well, yeah, I think there would be a variety of factors that would lead to that.
Plus the audio.
Yeah, I think certainly, you know, there's going to be forensic evidence of powder residue or whatever in the barrel reflecting that the gun had been fired. You would have, although it's possible it could have been loaded out that way, you would have, you know, one fewer round in the gun than you would expect it was fully loaded out. Conceivably, you could load it. Conceivably, somebody could load the magazine full, but not have one in the chamber, and then jack one in the chamber, and then you've got your magazine's not full. Possible.
But if there was not one in the chamber, there was not going to be an AD.
Exactly. So there would have to be one in the chamber. But if there's no AD, if there's no AD and there's the gun was initially, the mag was initially put in the gun, and then the round chambered, you'd have one room for one still in the mag. So you wouldn't know if it had, so you can't tell simply because there's room for one in the mag. You don't know if it was because a round was chambered after the round was loaded, or there was an inadvertent discharge with a round already in the chamber.
No, I get that, but I think a ballistic examination of the firearm will say this gun had just been fired within the last, 12 hours.
And we haven't even seen that leaked yet, which would, you would expect that to have been leaked out in some fashion by now.
Yeah.
But more importantly, when I looked at the video, I saw those images, I saw those reports, I saw the people claiming that, and I tried to look at it. I looked at the still images, and I kind of scratched my head. So first of all, I was like, this has got a relatively decent sized optic on it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that slide back, or are you just seeing the optic?
Sure.
And the other thing is, it's got a threaded barrel, which extends out because of threaded barrel. If you don't, you certainly understand, Greg, but for others who might not,
it's going to have to appearance that it's in lockback.
It extends about an inch beyond the frame of the handgun. So it's going to look like a normal gun without a threaded barrel. That's where the
in lockback
back some. So there's going to be a similar resemblance, and that image is so grainy. It's like,
yes, yep.
Is it one? Is it the other? And then the other thing that really struck me is, I'll ask you, if you've got a gun in your right hand and it inadvertently discharges, you're going to just have a reflex reaction to the fact that it did that when you're not expecting it. And I don't see any reaction by the agent running with the gun.
That gun, I don't know anything about guns, except I read that gun has a reputation for accidentally discharging.
There's lots of videos.
But if the guy didn't react, then he probably didn't. Bill, are you okay if we take a phone call or two from the audience?
Sure.
All right. We got somebody on hold right now. Let me take it. I think it might be Somerville John. Is that you, John?
Yes, it is. Good evening, Greg, and good evening to your audience. Greg, I'm watching all of this, and I believe that there are a lot of still unresolved questions. We have seen these, I think, 7 policemen, whatever their designation is, and I wonder, were they all men? I saw one person that looked possibly maybe to be a lady. And then I asked myself, is this just a collection of 7 people from some group of agents that were just thrown together and never worked together before as a team? Like you get these football games in the park, Have we also established the fact that Mr. Petty was some sort of activist, that he was part of a national organization that was hell-bent on ruining or throwing a wrench in the monkey works from this whole arrest business? Is it not also to blame on the local government that they were not there to help the other agents and keep these crazy people away from?
All right, John, we're not going to be able to remember if you keep asking questions.
Well, I think I got all 3 of the questions in mind. In the first one
just
being...
Just pause for a second, John, and we'll come back to you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Most likely, it's a bit of a hodgepodge that these groups are being thrown in together. They're probably being, taken from various parts of the country and from different assignments, and then they're being assigned to teams. So often enough, you're meeting these people for maybe the first time or for the last couple of days, but no, you're not trained as a team would be, like an ordinary SWAT team or a special response team. So they're probably just temporarily thrown together, either on a day-by-day basis or maybe even a weekly basis. But that is that part of the question. The guy, it seems like he's more than just a passive observer. He appears, I think, and Bill touched on it, that he's part of an organized group that monitors and follows ICE operations with the intent to at least record, if not disrupt, the investigations or the raids by injecting themselves directly into the middle of things. And
His other question is, any females in there, or are they all male officers?
they're all masked. So, I mean, it's anybody's guess. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there were, because there are more females now in law enforcement than ever. But I can't tell from watching the video that short amount of time if there is or not. But it shouldn't make any difference anyway, even if there are.
Also, did you address whether or not they've worked together before? Do we know?
Yeah, and I said probably not. And if they did, it's probably been only for the last couple of days or a week, because they're drawing on, it's like an all hands on deck sort of a thing. So, and they're rotating people in and out. So they probably.
Well, let me ask a question to Bill. What about the fact that they were Border Patrol agents as opposed to ICE? A lot of people are getting that wrong, and I don't know whether that's, I mean, of course you should get right what the agency is, but is there a big difference in terms of training between the two agencies?
Well, they have different missions in their normal jobs. The Border Patrol guys, the Border Patrol guys can be kind of rough and tumble, because they're out there in the dirt on the border. Their primary mission is to defend the border between ports of entry. So, if you're like down on the southwest border in Arizona and New Mexico and Texas, there are ports of entry where, people could lawfully cross from, one country into the other. But in between, the border is patrolled by the Border Patrol. That's what they do. And that's, that's kind of be a little bit of a Wild West show. The ICE guys work in the interior of the United States. They work in cities all across the country. They enforce all different kinds of immigration laws, not just, apprehending illegal aliens. The Border Patrol guys, their primary function is to turn around illegal border crossers. So they get.
So neither agency is really skilled with crowd control.
No, they're not, and that's part of the problem here is, they look to cooperation with locals to help them with perimeter enforcement. The way this is done everywhere else is the locals have got a contingent right there working with them, and they know the streets, they know the building, they provide the perimeter security so that the Border Patrol or ICE guys can go find the person they're looking for. Without worrying about what's going on the street that they can't see.
I mean, Jeff, this goes back to when we talked earlier in the show before Bill was able to join us, that if Minnesota deployed their police department appropriately, this probably, nobody has a crystal ball, but this is unlikely to have happened. If those were local police officers trying to make this arrest, I would say there's a high degree of probability that this would not have resulted in gunfire.
Well, let me that to you.
Let me follow up on the Border Patrol. Obviously Minnesota's, hold that thought, Bill, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Minnesota's not a border state, yet they're there.
Yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is.
It is. Yeah, it's got a Canadian border.
It is.
Okay, but
so is that why they're there, though? I mean, what percentage of, how many, or percentage-wise, Border Patrol have left their usual mission to go inland? That's my question.
Tell them about the 100-mile law.
Yeah, that's my point is, Border Patrol typically operates within 100 miles of the international border. Minneapolis is not 100 miles from Canada, so there might be Border Patrol, though I doubt there's very many. There might be Border Patrol up on the northern border, all across from Wisconsin to Minnesota to South Dakota.
All right, so I wasn't that wrong. I flunked geography in school.
Right.
But my question is, how many or what percentage have come inland, leaving their usual mission?
Well, I don't know, but I will say that my understanding, Border Patrol is significantly bigger numbers-wise than ICE. ICE has two components. ICE has sort of this criminal enforcement component, and then they have what they call the removal component, which are actually the people that are managing people, managing aliens transport from location A to location B to their home country. Two different operations that are all both part of ICE, but on a purely bodies basis, manpower, Border Patrol is bigger. So when manpower is needed, and again, you can't take every Border Patrol officer from Arizona and bring them to Minnesota. You might bring 15%, from different offices, bring 15% of them to Arizona for 30 days or to Minnesota for 30 days, 45 days, and then they're going back. And then you might take the same number and you borrow them from Texas and you bring them to Minnesota and they stay 30 days and then they go back.
Right. See, the reason I ask is I don't want to be nitpicking and go, hey, you got the agency wrong. But if people are saying abolish ICE, I'm trying to steer the conversation in a more productive direction. Like, well, who is going to enforce it? How can we improve it? And one of the commenters are saying, well, now the local police are cooperating. Tom Homan is there, and he seems to be instrumental in changing the whole tone. What is your take on how the situation is changing right now and will change in the coming days?
Well, I mean, Tom Homan's got 40 years in the business. I mean, this is what he's done his whole career, and managing relationships and having cooperative working understandings with locals has always been part of the job. And he's, maybe the best that the federal government's ever had at doing what he does. And my understanding from the reporting is he's had no involvement in Minnesota. And he's got a more, let's take a step back, let's be smarter, and let's try to be more effective and more efficient with a smaller footprint. And I think that's the message that he took to Walz. Apparently, Jacob Fry is rejecting any kind of cooperation with the enforcement of federal immigration law. He's just too politically invested in having, no effort to remove illegal aliens from the city of Minneapolis. Would do too much political damage for him to ever cave in on that issue. Tim Walz, on the other hand, doesn't just have the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul to worry about. He's got the entire state, and I think, there's a thing in Minnesota. I've just been reading about it. I didn't know it was true. It's like, large parts of Minnesota do not want to be associated with the people of Minneapolis. They have no interest. And even St. Cloud. That's not hard to believe. And even St. Cloud, there's an attitude in St. Cloud that we're not part of Minneapolis. They're on their own.
Well, Walz activated the National Guard, and we saw video of them, handing out the donuts and coffee and so forth. And I don't know whether that's all they're doing or not. Can you give us any insight on how they are likely to behave, where their loyalties lie, what their role is?
I think that's just Tim Walz doing a little bit of performance art because, it's being mentioned that, 5.5 years ago, he never activated the National Guard for 4 nights while Minneapolis burned. So It's like, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to activate the National Guard. Even if they don't have anything to do, they're going to be activated. And so they can hand out coffee and donuts, but they're activated and nobody's going to say I didn't do it. But I don't think there's any real, I think what's going to happen is, after the Rachel Good shooting,
Renee Good.
Renee Good shooting. Decision was made, right, wrong, indifferent. I'm not going to judge it because I don't know all the ins and outs. Decision was made to increase the number of federal law enforcement from 2,000 to 3,000, like doubling down after that shooting. Mm-hmm. And now we have a second shooting 15 days later. I don't know exactly how many days. And I think, the people who thought doubling down was a good idea now have to acknowledge that doubling down probably wasn't the right reaction. And I think the right reaction is, let's reassess our tactics. We're not reassessing the mission. We are not going to, acquiesce to the demands of Minnesota's, ultra liberal left wingers who think there's no such thing as an illegal person. We're going to continue to enforce the law. We're going to continue to enforce immigration, but we're going to enforce immigration in the smartest way. And that sometimes requires a scalpel and not an axe.
Well, what about the other demands, one of which you just addressed, which was bringing the National Guard so that the federal agents don't have to handle crowd control as much? And you're saying, well, that's not really a significant change. But the other big one was having access to the jails. And you explained when you were on the Whiners with us how fruitful that was when you were prosecutor and would be in this case. So is Homan negotiating for that, do you think?
Well, what I saw reported today, and I've been away from the online, I've been offline quite a bit today doing other stuff. But what I did see reported today is that Walz has said, ICE has identified 187 illegal aliens in state custody, in state prison. And Walz has said that we will honor the detainers for all 187 people. Now, but as is true in pretty much every state, there's far more in local custody, in county jails, county and city jails, much larger numbers than in state prison, except maybe in California. And Frey so far has said they will not. They are not going to, illegal aliens coming out of Minneapolis jail will not be turned over to ICE, which is what, and this has been Homan's message everywhere he goes. He said, look, and this goes back early on to California. Homan said, look, if you turn them over to us, we don't have to go looking for them in the community. Mm-hmm. If you don't turn them over for us and you release them in the community, from our perspective, they're a threat to the community. They're a threat to the country. We're going to go look for them in the community. And oh, by the way, if we find them in the company of other illegal aliens, we're taking everybody, whether we're looking for the others or not. We are not going to selectively enforce the immigration law. So if we go into a house looking for one criminal illegal alien and we find 10 because they're all family members, all 10 are going. Not if you'd just given us the one at the jail, we'd have left the other 9 alone because we're not looking for them. But if we have to go find the one and he's with the other 9, all 10 are going. And that's the message. That has worked everywhere else to gain the cooperation of state and local authorities, except in Chicago, Illinois, various parts of California, Portland, and now Minneapolis.
Bill, what do you think about the idea? And I don't. This is out of my lane, but withholding federal funding anywhere legally possible to those particular cities.
Well, I think they're going to, but then what they're doing is they're buying lawsuits from the interest groups that benefit from that funding. They run into court and they get some sympathetic judge to impose an injunction that mandates the government continue to pay. One thing I don't think it's a huge amount of money, but it is a decent amount of money that most cities, particularly in counties, benefit from, are the Justice Department grants. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of grants that they give to help local departments hire personnel or pay overtime or buy equipment. Federal tax dollars help local municipalities afford those things which they might not otherwise be able to afford when they're making budgetary choices. Well, you could cut those off. It's like, if you don't want to cooperate with us trying to enforce the law, we don't have to give you these grants to help you enforce the law. It's like, the cooperation is only running one direction.
Yep.
So the Justice Department grants, because they're both related to law enforcement, cooperation with law enforcement, that's probably a much easier hurdle to overcome in the courts. Cutting off welfare or other kinds of social assistance, that's always just going to be, you're just going to buy yourself one court battle after another. Not that you shouldn't do it, but that's what's coming down the road.
Okay.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes, John.
Do we know how many federal agents now will be sent to Minnesota, to Minneapolis, to investigate the Somali money fraud for billions and billions of dollars? Will that be hundreds of agents?
Let me say this. I don't think it would take hundreds of agents. And it doesn't have to be done in Minnesota. That kind of investigation is largely, reviewing records, computer records, financial documents, bank records. Agents could do that. FBI headquarters has a huge contingent of analysts that do that kind of work. It certainly is based in Minnesota, but it can be done from anywhere. And my understanding is the FBI has committed a significant amount of resources to pursuing that further. And the various components of the Department of Justice, prosecutors in Maine Justice have been tasked with, potentially taking over the lead on that, because it does to some degree outstrip the prosecutorial resources of the U.S. Attorney in Minnesota. It's not a huge office. It might have 75 or 80 prosecutors. Sounds like a lot, but it's really not. New York has 700. Possible, but I think I have no doubt that the Somali fraud prosecution is going to be pursued with both feet.
All right, John, thanks for the call.
Yes, you're very welcome, and everybody stay safe and stay warm.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
I got about another 5 minutes here, Jeff, and then I'm gonna have to sign off.
All right, we can wrap it up. So I want to thank you for not only the usual thank you, but I know that you left was it sons or daughters basketball?
The daughter volleyball game tonight.
Daughter's volleyball game. Yeah. Well, I hope that we didn't create family strife, but we certainly appreciate it, and thank you for leaving the game early for us.
Happy to be here.
All right.
Bill, thank you very much. I enjoyed your perspective on this, because this is certainly in your wheelhouse, and it was very educational.
It was. And let's remind folks that Bill's great Substack is worth subscribing to. And Bill, you're going to be able to buy that summer home in Malibu because I am now a paid subscriber.
I appreciate that, and if you'd have just asked, that wouldn't have been necessary. But I appreciate it.
No, I'm happy to support you. Thank you so much.
All right, guys.
All right,
take care,
Bill. All right, bye. All right, Greg, you want to do? Has it happened to Greg before we call it a night, or do you want to?
Yeah, it wouldn't be our podcast if we didn't, I think.
All right, this is when we look at some videos of police encounters, and then we ask Greg, the former cop, has anything like that ever happened to him? All right, here's a heartwarming one. We we're mired in this very traumatic, sad, controversial situation. This is a lot lighter, and I would love to know if you ever did anything like this or what you think about this. Take a look.
Okay.
Two police officers having a really slow day at work, and you won't believe what I decided to do next.
Hello, officers.
Hi.
How you doing, sir? Good. How are you guys? Good. How can we help you? I'm Officer Ryan.
Officer Contreras.
Nice to meet you guys. I'm Nina. This might sound crazy, but basically what I do is I go around and just spread love and kindness. There's someone selling flowers up there on the pier, so I was thinking maybe we go and buy all the flowers and just hand them out to random strangers.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah? Yeah.
They were so excited to help spread kindness.
Hello, sir. How are you? How much for one rose? How much would it be for all of them?
Okay, $165.
Can I give you $300?
Siento bien. Diosito, tanto para la renta.
You ladies want a rose?
Yeah. Thank you.
It brought so many beautiful smiles to everybody.
There you go. Hey.
People even started to take pictures with the officers.
You guys are awesome. Appreciate you guys.
Mission accomplished. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure you follow for more.
All right. You know what I liked about that was that they immediately said yes, and they didn't check with their supervisor or anything like that. Is that the sort of thing that in most police departments that a cop could just decide to do on their own if offered like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's not my experience, but it seems like that's a lot more acceptable today. They have these, coffee
Community
with cops.
policing.
Yeah, they do these different things, cookies with rookies and all these various, sort of feel good programs. And there's a place for it. I mean, as long as it doesn't become the focus of the mission, but a side part of it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, they look like they were just, on duty in a tourist.
It looked like they were assigned to the pier. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it probably did not.
It doesn't detract from their mission to walk around and hand out flowers.
No. It only enhances the reputation of the department to be involved with something like that.
All right. Would you have fun doing that if you were presented with that opportunity?
Yeah, I think I'd have a lot of fun with it. Yeah, sure. I mean, what's not to like, right? Everybody's happy to see you, and they want to take their picture with you. That's just a win-win.
All right. Well, you can give me flowers if you want. Valentine's Day is coming up.
You're too far away.
Come on. There's a delivery service in my city.
Yeah, that's not as personal, though.
All right. Here's another one that's even more unique, but very different. And I don't know if this is kosher or not. It's understandable, but something about it doesn't feel quite right, even though it's understandable. Did I give it too big a build-up? Should I just play it?
Yeah, I'm curious now. Sure.
I'm sorry. I'm having technical difficulty. No.
Oh, that's okay. It's a stall then.
No. I'm kidding.
Robert, I'm Sheriff Chitwood. I'm the one who made this trip responsible for you. I think it's important that these people who you screwed over, you look them in the eyes, because it's easy what you did, right? It's really hard to realize all these lives you affected. And the message is clear. If you do this in my county, we're coming to get you no matter what. Anybody want to say anything? Go ahead. All right, you get the message?
I'm very sorry and innocent until proven guilty, and hopefully this will get fixed.
How are you going to fix it?
I can't say any more than that. I mean, this is,
Okay. All right, you guys ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, guys, we're going to walk through here, so.
I've never seen anything like that. Have you?
I'm not a fan. I mean, what's next? The pillory?
Yeah.
There's a place for that, and that's called the courtroom. If the victims want to express their outrage or their disgust, they have the opportunity to do that at time of sentencing or as witnesses on during a trial. But that's just theater, and I'm sort of embarrassed to see it.
Yeah. I mean, they may have the goods on them, but everybody is presumed innocent. So
exactly.
Yeah. And excuse me. And they're taunting, "You're a scumbag. You're a scumbag." That just seems very weird.
I think sometimes the ones that are putting these self-promotional videos on are sheriffs that run for re-election. And I think they feel like it gives them an advantage come re-election time, which I always found a problem with those positions, that they're elected positions. So they tend to cater, to the public, to the whims of the public, as opposed to trying to do their job objectively and neutral.
Right. Well, there were some other sheriffs or deputies, whatever they're called, on the scene there. But I was just thinking, if the crowd got so worked up that that they lynched this guy, there may be some serious liability, right?
Oh, what if just somebody threw a bottle and struck him in the head? I mean, yeah, they're going to arrest the person, but they set up the scenario where he could be injured.
Right. All right. We have one more. This one's not great, but let's take a look anyway.
Stop. Please stop. Hey, stop. No, please stop. I got one running. Stop. Stop or you're going to get tackled.
Why? Oh my. I didn't do nothing.
Stop.
Sir, I didn't do anything. Why are you doing this to me?
I'm in front of Publix.
Sir, I'm just
I got
riding
him
my
on the ground right
bike.
now.
I'm not doing anything, sir. Sir, what I do?
When I say stop, you need to stop.
I didn't know you were talking
You looked
to
at me straight in my eyes and kicked
I
the
never
whole
looked at you. Sir, I just came out and started riding. I didn't look at you. No, I didn't know you were talking to me.
You looked at me straight in my eyes.
Sir, I never looked at your eyes. I would have stopped.
You said, why are you stopping me? And you kept riding your
No, I
bike.
never said that. Sir, I never said that.
Yeah. Well, we'll just move past all that, okay? So when an officer in the future, when you see an officer and they tell you to stop,
I'll
just make sure you
stop,
stop. But we're here because of the stuff you stole at Kohl's.
I didn't steal nothing, sir.
Oh.
That's not my backpack.
I assume he probably stole all this stuff. Yeah, figure out, like, these are all $50 each. What they use. He must have been slick with it, bro.
Second time? Notice that?
Port Orange. What state is that?
I think Florida.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It's probably a real crime there. If it was California, then he gets to keep it.
I love that stop or you'll be tackled. That was a kind of a new one.
Yeah. That guy, I guess, wasn't in too good shape if he couldn't out-pedal somebody who was running. Generally, the bike should give you the advantage, right?
One would think.
Did you ever have to give foot pursuit to somebody on a bicycle?
You know, Jeff, now this is funny. One night, me and my partner were running radar, and a bicycle, this is at night, went by very quickly. And I made the joke, gee, I didn't get him on radar. I wonder how fast he was going on that bicycle. Mm-hmm. And then like 10 minutes later, we get a call to go to a local pizza place to report of a stolen bicycle. And just as we start to drive in that direction, I said to my partner, wait a second. I said something about that bicyclist that drove past us so quickly, I said about 10 minutes ago. And we turned around and we went down Route 1 for several miles. And we couldn't spot him, but I decided to go down a side street. And I spotted the bike pulling into a driveway. And we ended up making the arrest of the stolen bicycle.
Wow. Dylan's, what's the word I'm spacing out on? Intuition. Dylan's intuition. You just picked a side street.
Yeah. I just felt like this is about as far as he could have gotten before he would probably want to turn off, because it was Route 1 and it's a commercial road. The sort of funny part of it was I ended up having to subdue and restrain the thief, and got him into the car, put the bicycle in the trunk, and drove back. And then the young man who reported the bicycle stolen wasn't sure that was his bicycle.
Oh, jeez.
And of course, that got my heart racing a bit, because now I'm thinking, gee, I hope I didn't just handcuff and arrest someone who was actually on their own bicycle.
How do you not know if it's your bike unless it's brand new or something? But even then, if it's brand new, that would give it away. If it's used, it would have certain marks on it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I know. It was at nighttime, and we were under the lights and whatever. He's young, but he recognized finally that it in fact was his bicycle. Thank goodness.
All right, very good.
Yes.
Well, before we call it a night, there was a suggestion from my friend Helen, our friend Helen.
Yeah.
An idea And that idea is a conversation between you, Greg Dillon, and Mark Gruber from America's Untold Stories to discuss safety control and police force within cities as it relates to sanctuary cities. What do you make of them apples?
Sounds interesting. I'm not familiar with this gentleman or America's
Me
Untold
neither.
Stories.
Well, let's look into who he is, but do you like the topic?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's very timely. Sanctuary cities are something that we're all dealing with now.
Helen, what is Mark's role in life? Is he, other than being a host of a show, is he a cop, former cop, a lawyer, a pedophile? Let's see. Do we have a response from Helen? Somerville John wants to know if you handcuffed him.
I did. But everyone got handcuffed back then.
All right. Well, maybe Helen's not with us anymore. All right. Well, then let's just remind the audience that tomorrow night is Wednesday night, and that means Ask the Inspector. Oh, Mark is a comedian and writer, Helen says. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Tomorrow night, 7 p.m., Scott Ritter, Ask the Inspector. And then Thursday on the Whiners with my pals Morgan and Ryan, our guest will be Nathan Daly, an ex-cop, and we'll find out what agency he worked for. And then
okay.
I'll answer your question. I'm sure you'll be tuned in, Greg, and you'll find out for yourself when we ask him. All right, Greg, thanks a lot. Always a pleasure. Thanks to our beloved audience. And, of course, thanks to Shipwrecked Crew, the creme de la creme of police and self-defense analysts. Although Andrew Bronca is up there, too. We love them both. We've had them both on.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting good guests, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good night. We'll see you next week on Probable Cause. Good night.